ready to return. New developments in the health of President Donald Trump, including whether he will be back on the campaign trail anytime soon. Entering the spotlight. Confirmation hearings begin next week for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. We have a preview. Coronavirus crisis, an update on the efforts to produce a vaccine for COVID-19. And holiness in the 21st century. A closer look at the life of Carlo Acutis, set to be beatified tomorrow. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, October 9th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Now that he's feeling better, President Donald Trump may try to hold a campaign rally as early as tomorrow. The president was on the Rush Limbaugh show this afternoon and said that he is getting great polling in key states. And he tweeted today that COVID relief negotiations are moving along. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
President Donald Trump is eager to get back on the campaign trail. He has his sights on Florida. His doctor says Saturday will mark 10 days since the president's COVID-19 diagnosis. He writes, based on the trajectory of advanced diagnostics the team has been conducting, I fully anticipate the president's safe return to public engagements at that time. Dr. Sean Conley also says the president's physical exam has remained stable and devoid of any indications to suggest progression of illness, adding, overall, he's responded extremely well to treatment, without evidence on examination of adverse therapeutic effects.
This legislation applies to future presidents.
Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who wants more facts on the president's health, unveils a bill invoking the 25th Amendment that would set up a commission to assess the president's ability to lead the country.
This is not about President Trump. He will face the judgment of the voters.
The president fires back on Twitter. Crazy Nancy Pelosi is looking at the 25th Amendment in order to replace Joe Biden with Kamala Harris. The Dems want that to happen fast because Sleepy Joe is out of it. Meanwhile, a U.S. Marine standing outside the West Wing is an indication the president has been busy working inside the Oval Office. Until today, his only on-camera appearances have been produced by the White House. Still, the White House says the president has been busy talking to lawmakers and other world leaders. The president's even weighing in on an FBI case against militants accused of plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She blames the president for empowering radicals. But the president tweets, I do not tolerate any extreme violence. Defending all Americans, even those who oppose and attack me, is what I will always do as your president. Governor Whitmer, open up your state. Open up your schools and open up your churches. And up in the air, the next two presidential debates.
I anticipate there will be a second debate. We're going to want to do it in person, though. It's not going to be virtual.
Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
On Monday, the confirmation hearing for Judge Amy Coney Barrett nominated to the Supreme Court will begin in the Senate Judiciary Committee. As Judge Barrett prepares, senators on both sides of the aisle are also getting ready as well. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, at the advice of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrats are expected to focus on Judge Barrett's previous decisions as a federal judge, but Republicans plan to embrace those decisions, and they also, several sources tell me, plan to highlight her strong Catholic faith and family values and make it the centerpiece of the hearing.
This is the Super Bowl of sort of what a chairman would do.
Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham previews Judge Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation.
I'm committed to making sure my Democratic colleagues have a couple of days to question, like we always do, have an opening statement, and we have outside input.
Senate Democrats criticize Republicans for nominating Judge Barrett during the COVID-19 pandemic.
President Trump and the Senate Republicans have decided to do above everything else an abandonment of these efforts so they can focus on rushing to fill a Supreme Court vacancy.
And they say Judge Barrett's rulings will favor President Trump.
Donald Trump, for all practical purposes, has said that his nominees are going to vote to overturn the Affordable Care Act.
Congressman Bob Latta tells me the U.S. Supreme Court is not about politics.
You go back to Justice Ginsburg, it was 96-3. People knew that she was a liberal. but they looked at, did she have the judicial qualifications to serve on the court? So the Democrats are the ones that have made this a highly politicized event.
And Justice Stephen Breyer says justices are impartial.
Once that black robe goes on, you are a judge. And there is no point, and I haven't seen it, deciding things on political ground.
Monday, it all begins.
I think America is lucky to have you to be nominated. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Senators Tom Tillis and Mike Lee both sit on the Judiciary Committee, and both are currently battling COVID-19 right now. Now, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Lindsey Graham, has given them the option to be able to hear the hearing remotely rather than be here in person. Tracy.
Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill for us tonight. Thank you so much, Eric. 4 people held hostage by Islamic extremists in Mali have been released. They include a Catholic priest and a 75-year-old aid worker from France.
Alors vraiment, je te demande de me pardonner. C'est tout ce que je voulais.
Sophie Petronin, shown with her son, says she lost weight and a few teeth, but otherwise is doing fine after her nearly 4-year ordeal. She was met at the airport by her family and French President Emmanuel Macron. Also released was Father Pier Luigi Macaulay, a missionary priest from Italy who was held captive for 2 years. Armenia says Azerbaijan is responsible for the shelling of a historic cathedral. The Holy Savior Cathedral is in a disputed region that has been the site of fierce fighting between the countries. At least 1 person was injured. Officials in Azerbaijan deny being behind the strike. They say their forces do not target historical or religious buildings. A late-stage trial of a potential COVID-19 vaccine has begun in Britain. U.S.-based company Novavax is testing the effectiveness among 10,000 people. It is part of a global drive to find a safe and effective vaccine that would allow authorities to ease restrictions that have hammered the world economy. More than 250,000 people in the UK have signed up to take part in the trials. And in Spain, the government has declared a state of emergency in Madrid over the rise of COVID-19 cases. The measures are expected to last 2 weeks. They include restrictions on travel, and police have been told to issue fines if people leave their region without justification. Madrid's conservative regional government calls the plans, quote, draconian. Coming up, analysis of a lawsuit against the state of New York filed by the Diocese of Brooklyn. Members of Congress are supporting a Washington, D.C. church's lawsuit against the city's restrictions on outdoor religious services. Capitol Hill Baptist Church says the measure discriminates against faith-based gatherings by limiting them to no more than 100 people. But mass protests this past summer in D.C. faced no restrictions. The Diocese of Brooklyn is suing the state of New York over a new order that restricts some indoor masses in New York City to just 10 people. That executive order comes amid a new spike in coronavirus cases in sections of Brooklyn and Queens. A written statement from Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio of the Diocese of Brooklyn reads in part, quote, "The executive orders this week have left us with no other option than to go to court. Our churches have the capacity to accommodate many worshipers and to reset our attendance capacity to 10 people maximum in the red zone and 25 people in the orange zone when we have had no significant cases impedes our right to worship and cannot stand." Earlier today, we spoke about this case with a specialist in protecting religious freedom. Joining me now on Skype to take a look at these new restrictions is Montse Alvarado, Vice President and Executive Director at Becket, a nonprofit law firm dedicated to protecting religious freedom. Montse, welcome back. Always so good to see you. The attorney representing the Diocese of Brooklyn in this lawsuit calls the executive order, quote, wrong and wrong-headed. How do you see it, and what do these restrictions do to the free exercise of religion?
Absolutely, they're wrong and wrong-headed. These churches opened in July. None of these churches had a COVID problem. And even though they have experience showing that their protocol works, the government is definitely targeting them. This is targeting. They're drawing lines and creating ghettos around Catholic communities and Jewish communities. It's wrong.
Montse, public safety, of course, we know is a concern, and we all continue to be vigilant against the spread of the coronavirus. Can you talk about some of the measures the faithful and the diocese have taken as part of their reopening plan in New York?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that the idea that the liturgy is unpredictable, particularly the Catholic Mass, which has order and structure to it, is ludicrous. This diocese opened up their churches safely, cooperatively, responsibly, and in partnership with the government. So not having communion on the tongue, making sure that they're social distance, giving appropriate spacing and communion lines, asking people to make sure that they're staying just with their family unit are just basic things that have been done. Catholics are naturally rule followers. We're going to follow whatever our shepherds tell us in terms of making sure that we're all safe and we can all worship, because we know that the Eucharist is essential to this community.
Montse, can you talk about how those precautions, how they've worked?
They've worked fantastically. Like I mentioned, since July, they have not had any kind of super spreader or contagion issue. They're showing that COVID is showing us this importance and essential nature of church. And the churches are actually picking up the pieces of people's lives and everything that they've lost. They've lost their jobs. They've lost their ability to be in community. I mean, since March 24th, the Catholic Charities in Brooklyn and Queens, they've been in partnership with parishes, getting 300,000 meals out through food pantries, through their networks, emergency pop-up food distributions, home-delivered meals programs. They're not just there for the physical needs. We know they're there for the spiritual needs and for the health and welfare of the whole community.
As you know, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has listed schools and religious gatherings as the top 2 situations in which viral spreads happen. How is this affecting Catholic schools in Brooklyn as well as in Queens?
This is going to be an issue for Catholic schools, for Jewish schools, for anyone who is trying to safely gather in any way. And it looks like targeting because these schools do not have any kind of COVID infections. And should there be a COVID infection, there is a protocol in place to make sure that those students and families are safe. This is not where the government should be looking. These are the safe places where people are going to gather with protocol in place.
Montse, I think this is really important to mention, that it's not just the Diocese of Brooklyn that's suing. Orthodox Jewish organizations are suing the governor as well, and we've seen a lot of protests this week in those communities. Talk a little bit about how these restrictions are impacting synagogues.
I'll tell you one thing that I think is really important to remember. Synagogues are a really important place for the Jewish community, but so are their schools. Their schools are essential. It's part of how they live their life in teaching the next generation the faith and how to live it. Sukkot starts tonight. It's the second half of the Festival of Tabernacles, and one of the more holy days that this community celebrates, in addition to Shabbos, which starts tonight as well. So you're walking into a really important season of celebration and gathering for this community, and it seems wrong that the government is going to choose this moment when they do not have infection problems to stop them from gathering and being together. It's this perverse one-upmanship contest between de Blasio, who started targeting the Jewish community in the beginning of the pandemic, and now Governor Cuomo, who's decided that Catholics and Jews have to kind of stick to the lines that he's drawn on a map. He's creating these religious ghettos, and it's wrong.
Montse, we don't have a lot of time, but I'm curious, what happens next? What happens if this executive order is allowed to stand?
So they've got 2 hearings coming up in those 2 cases, 4 p.m. and 1:30 today. So we'll know a little bit more about what the courts are going to do with this. And hopefully they will decide that this is illegal in America and that it's targeting. And it's just a good reminder for us that in religious liberty, we have to remember that you can't wait for the bear to eat you last. Work together with people who believe different things to get the right outcomes and stop the government from meddling in church affairs.
Well, Montse, thank you so much for your time and for your analysis. We always appreciate it. Montse Alvarado, Vice President and Executive Director at Becket. Thanks again, Montse.
Thank you.
Well, there's also some good news for the faithful in New York. Recently, 2 women took the final step in joining a religious order about 30 miles outside of Manhattan. EWTN's Colin Flynn has more.
In the village of Suffern in New York, the Sisters of Life prepare for one of their most special days.
It's today that our sisters, by vow, give their lives, the entirety of their lives and their love to the Lord.
Sister Virginia Joy from South Carolina in the United States and Sister Naomi Maria Magnificat from Limerick in Ireland profess their final vows on a summer's day in August.
This is what I was made for. We're all made for heaven, we're all made for union with Jesus. So I entered 8 years ago, and then I'd known probably for like 3 or 4 years before I entered that I was called to religious life.
Religious life itself is a mystery because, how does God call or speak to a soul? It's so individual, it's so unique, it's so personal. He guides and leads us all very uniquely, very personally.
Would those seeking perpetual profession please come forward?
I, Virginia Beth Cotter.
I, Naomi Rebecca Collins.
Called in religion, Sister Virginia Joy.
Called in religion, Sister Naomi Maria Magnificat.
Do vow to Almighty God, poverty, chastity, obedience, and to protect and enhance the sacredness of human life, and to persevere faithfully until death.
For the rest of their lives, they will care for those whose lives are vulnerable and in need. Their work will look humble and little, but it will have tremendous effects of bringing hope to others. I receive your vows with great joy.
Sister, receive this ring, for you are betrothed to the eternal King. Keep faith in your bridegroom so that you may come to the wedding feast of eternal joy.
Beyond words, I feel, just overwhelmed, really. I think the word is just gratitude. I'm just so grateful, to the Lord for all He's done and continues to do.
It was wonderful just to see all the sisters again, all my new big family. I had 10 sisters, now I have over 100.
My hopes and dreams are that every human heart has an encounter with the living God, the author of their life.
Trust your deepest intuition that you are made for something great, that your life is actually eternal, and to claim the dignity that God has given you. Be who you are, and you will be great.
In New York, Colm Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, we introduce you to Carlo Acutis, set to be beatified tomorrow in Assisi, Italy. Tomorrow marks the annual observance of World Mental Health Day, aimed at raising awareness of mental health issues faced by people around the globe. This year's commemoration comes amid challenges faced by so many as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me now on Skype is Dr. Suzanne Nordier-Holman, clinical psychologist and director of clinical operations at Georgetown University Counseling and Psychiatric Services. Dr. Holman, welcome back. So good to talk to you. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted public health in an unprecedented way. Can you talk about the ways the pandemic has impacted mental health, be it due to the isolation caused by lockdowns and restrictions, or maybe fear and anxiety about the virus in general?
I think, Tracy, it's not a secret that we've seen an incredible uptick in the needs for mental health help from people sometimes who've never needed mental health assistance before. And we're getting calls, I'm getting calls in my private practice from people who've never spoken to a therapist before. So I think a lot of us are getting in touch, maybe many times for the very first time, with needing help.
Doctor, in your opinion, do you think enough attention is actually being paid to supporting mental health initiatives and treatments now?
You know, I don't think so. But we're having a real issue just generally finding enough therapists who are available. Many therapists are full. And I also think that money is an issue. There's many people who need low-fee therapy, and sometimes there's long waits for those. On the plus side, there's a real awareness, I think, in the part of the mental health community that we need more services. And many therapists are opening up low-fee slots in order to help those who need it the most. But there is definitely a little bit of a supply and demand issue right now, I think, certainly in the DC area, in my experience.
What about those with substance use disorders? How have they been affected, and have we seen an increase in uses and overdoses during this time?
We absolutely have seen an increase. There's many different studies out there, some by the CDC, some by some other research organizations, that puts it anywhere between 16 and 29% jumps. So I think during this time, some people are reverting to substances as a form to cope with stress, and some people are starting to use substances for the very first time. And both of those coping mechanisms are not good long-term strategies, as we know, because they're very addictive.
Absolutely. I want to talk about our young people right now. How do you think the pandemic is impacting their mental health, especially since for so many of them, they're attending school again virtually and have limited in-person interaction with either their classmates and their teachers?
I think that's been very interesting, and what we're seeing is that if you think of it from a developmental perspective, a lot of these young people are not really supposed to be home, if you know what I mean. Lots of them had big plans for going to college. They've spent a lot of time thinking about where they'll go to college, along with their parents and families perhaps, and they are at home. Or they were at college quite happily, and then they had to go back home. So I think developmentally young people at that age really wanted to leave home in many instances, and as much as they love you, they might not necessarily be planning on living with you again so soon. So there's a lot of disappointment and a lot of frustration on behalf of some of the young people that they're dealing with, compounded with a work format that's all virtual and all online that some people are finding quite tiring. And they're not having the social stimulation to help cope with that. It has been a big adjustment for a lot of young people. A lot of them are doing well, though, I think. In general, but I don't think this is quite what anyone had in mind for this whole thing.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much for spending time with us today and talking about this very important subject. We appreciate it. Dr. Suzanne Nordier-Holman, thank you again.
Thank you. Good evening.
Pope Francis releases his prayer intention for the month of October. He is calling for a greater integration of the lay faithful in the church, especially women.
Laicos y laicas son protagonistas de la Iglesia.
The Holy Father emphasizes the importance of the female presence in the church, and he asks the faithful to pray for them to be have even more leadership roles, adding sometimes women are left aside in church matters. And finally tonight, young computer programmer Carlo Acutis will be beatified tomorrow in Assisi, Italy. He is known for his example of holiness, his passion for communications technology, and his devotion to the Eucharist. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Alan Holdren tells us the story of Carlo and how his deep-rooted faith influenced people around the world.
Carlo Acutis grew up in Milan, Italy. Just like any teenage boy, he was fascinated by computers, video games, soccer, school, and friends. Antonia Salzano, Carlo's mother, says her son made living the ordinary extraordinary. Carlo's passion was the world of information technology. He was fascinated with the potential good it could bring. He decided to create a web-based resource where people could learn about faith. Today, it's an apostolate that his family and members of the Association of Friends of Carlo Acutis continue to carry on. The work that Carlo started is now available in 17 languages, and anyone can see his Eucharistic Miracles exhibit and download it for free to print and place in their parishes. Antonia says that after Carlo's first communion at 7 years of age, he never missed an opportunity to receive the Eucharist, because it was his source of strength to live life with integrity. At 11 years old, he became an assistant catechist in the parish. He soon started to teach the catechism by himself. His deep faith and special relationship with the Eucharist even helped his mother to find her own path back to the church.
Carlo, io dico sempre, per me è stato un piccolo salvatore, ecco.
She says that it's the family that passes on the faith, and in her case, it was her son to pass it on to her. She calls him her little savior. When the doctors told Carlo he had leukemia in 2006 at just 15 years of age and that he could potentially die, he smiled and said, "The Lord gave me a beautiful alarm clock," as if to say, "My time has come." Scott Fial, a seminarian from the Diocese of Austin, Texas, now at Rome's Pontifical North American College, discovered Carlo during a recent retreat in Assisi.
I think he lived with a great love. He carried a heavy cross, but I think his story teaches us that our cross can be gifts to others, because once we go through something difficult, we know what someone else is going through and we can help them. I think his life has been a witness and a testament to that.
Carlo used to say that the Eucharist was his highway to heaven, and indeed, through the Eucharist, Carlo achieved heaven and now offers his example to all. The beatification of Carlo Acutis is a part of over 2 weeks of festivities, including Eucharistic adoration in the entire city of Assisi, which in fact they're calling not only the city of peace, but the Eucharistic city. In Rome, Alan Holdren, EWTN News Nightly.
And the Beatification Mass of Carlo Acutis will air tomorrow on EWTN at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.